The door slammed shut, and from behind the wood, my daughter's voice cut through the rain. "Dad, stop it. You don't live here anymore. You're basically homeless." I stood still on the porch, my small suitcase soaked through. The house worth over $1.3 million, the home my late wife Margaret and I had built brick by brick, now belonged to someone else. Not because I sold it, but because someone sold it for me. My name is Edward Hayes, 70 years old, widower, a former real estate appraiser who spent a lifetime putting a price on other people's homes, never imagining that one day my own daughter would put a price on mine. I thought my old age would be quiet lavender pots by the window, a cup of coffee each morning, and peace after loss. But everything collapsed one March afternoon when my daughter and her husband signed my name on papers I'd never seen, selling the house to pay off $800,000 of his restaurant debt. They called it a decision for the family. I called it betrayal. Before I tell you how I took everything back, not with fists, but with law silence and a promise made to the dead, tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe that justice sometimes arrives in silence, leave a comment and subscribe. It was September in Tacoma. The sky hung low, gray, and wet. The kind of rain that never really stopped, the kind that carries the smell of damp leaves and cold earth. I looked around Harbor View Drive, neat colonial-style houses, flags hanging in front yards, driveways washed clean by the rain. They all lived their quiet suburban peace. And I, once known around town as Honest Mr. Hayes, stood in the street like an unwanted guest in my own life. I could still hear Margaret's laughter echoing in the kitchen, the sound of her piano on Sunday nights, the scent of her apple pie drifting through this porch. Now all of it was locked behind a door that no longer opened for me. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Then came Laura's voice, trembling but firm. "Dad, please, don't make this harder. We already signed. The house isn't yours anymore." Her words fell heavy like nails driven straight into the rain. I whispered, barely hearing myself, "Laura, what are you doing? This was your mother's home." The door opened just a crack. Behind it stood Mark, her husband. His expression was calm, almost smug. "You should leave, Edward," he said flatly. "From now on, you'll need permission to step inside." I looked into his eyes, the same man who once called me Dad when he needed startup money for his restaurant. Now he was calling me an intruder. Across the street, Mrs. Walker, my neighbor for 20 years, stood with her phone raised. She whispered, "Oh my God, they're really kicking him out." Then I heard the soft click, the camera starting to record. That tiny red light blinked through the mist. I didn't blame her. If I were her, I'd record it too. You don't see a father thrown out of his own house every day in Tacoma. I turned, pulling my suitcase down the steps. The wheels left 2 long, wet lines on the brick walkway. And in my head, a voice my own narrated slowly, coldly. When your own child calls you homeless, you don't just lose your house. You lose your faith in family. I didn't yell, didn't pound on the door, didn't beg. I just stood there still. From the upstairs window, I saw Laura pull the curtain shut. For a second, her silhouette looked just like her mother's. That resemblance once gave me comfort. Now it felt like irony carved in flesh. Margaret had been gone since 2019, and I had just learned how wrong I was about my daughter, about trust, about love that should have known better. I walked back to my old pickup truck. The rain was heavier now. When I turned the ignition, my hands trembled. Not from cold, from anger. The quiet kind. The kind that runs deep like groundwater beneath stone. I didn't know where to go. There was nowhere left that I could call home. The porch light was still on a soft yellow glow that used to mean welcome. Now it was just a stranger's light behind a stranger's window. I took one last look, then drove away. On the radio, a news anchor said, "Seattle announces an 8% increase in property tax." I let out a dry laugh. The irony stung. One question echoed in my mind. How did they sell it without me knowing? 2 hours later, I parked by Lake Union. The rain had stopped. I opened the trunk and took out a small wooden box, Margaret's memory box. It smelled of pine and old paper. Inside was our wedding photo faded at the edges. I stared at it under the streetlight, then looked out at the black water reflecting the city lights. "I failed to protect our home, Maggie," I whispered. A seagull cried overhead, its sound fading into the night. I didn't cry. Didn't speak again. I just sat there until the voice from an old voicemail replayed in my head. "Promise me you'll never let anyone take this home from you." I gripped the lid of the box tighter, and in the silence I made a vow. I promised her, and I will keep that promise even if I have to reclaim every brick by law. By morning I checked into a small motel on the south side of Tacoma, the kind that rents rooms by the month. Gray walls, a small window facing a parking lot, just enough space for a man who had lost everything. I unpacked, sat at the desk, and opened my laptop. There it was, the first email in my inbox, subject Unity Real Estate Escrow, transaction complete, amount $875,000, buyer Unity Holdings, LLC. I read every line. My chest went cold. This wasn't just betrayal. It was orchestrated. I'd seen scams like this before, fake escrow accounts, forged notaries. I used to warn my clients about them. But I never thought I'd be one of the victims. I leaned back in the chair, eyes on the ceiling. Between two slow breaths, Margaret's voice echoed again in my memory. "Ed, people can take your house, but they can't take your dignity if you stay silent at the right time." Silence, yes. Sometimes silence is the beginning of revenge. I reached for my old notebook and wrote the first entry, September 3rd, 2025, Phase 1, stay silent. They think I'm old, weak, forgetful. But I spent a lifetime knowing what things are really worth. And betrayal always costs more than they expect. The camera pans out an old man sitting alone in a dim motel room, the yellow light outlining his sharp, steady gaze. Outside the window, the rain starts again, soft, rhythmic, deliberate, like the ticking of a plan taking shape. I still remember that night clearly, a warm July evening, thick with the smell of grilled meat and the dim amber glow of Tacoma's suburbs. Laura called earlier that day. "Dad, come over tonight. Mark's making your favorite BBQ ribs." Her voice sounded light, too light. There was a tremor under the sweetness, but I ignored it. When your daughter invites you for dinner, you don't ask questions. You just go. I arrived right on time. Their house sat in the quiet south end of the city, a classic suburban home with trimmed lawns, fairy lights wrapped neatly along the porch rail. Peaceful. Too peaceful, the kind that hides something underneath. People say betrayal doesn't start with lies. It starts with the way someone avoids your eyes. Laura greeted me at the door. New perfume. Expensive. She hugged me quick and stiff, then stepped back before our eyes met. Inside, Mark was at the backyard grill, apron on the orange flame flickering across the glass door, painting his face with a smile too perfect to be real. "Dad," he shouted cheerfully. "Glad you're here. I was just talking about real estate with Laura. You'd know best." I took my seat at the table. A glass of red wine waited filled to the rim. Mark started like it was casual conversation. You know the market's crazy right now, Dad. Houses in Harbor View are going for 1.5 million easy. Yours must be worth at least that, huh? I took a slow sip, tasting the sharpness, then answered evenly. There's no price for memories, Mark. Your mother told me some things are meant to be kept no matter the offer. The air froze for half a second. Mark's smile stayed, but his eyes didn't. Laura looked down, dragging her fork lightly against the plate. The faint metallic scrape cut through the silence like a warning. I looked around the table, perfect plates, folded napkins, candles, everything too neat, too staged. It felt less like a dinner and more like a performance with a script I hadn't been given. So I spoke again, slower this time. Your mother left a clause in the family trust back in 2019. No one can sell the house as long as I'm alive. Laura's hand stopped. Her lips trembled just enough to notice. Mark glanced at her, then back at me, grinning like someone who'd already found a loophole. Well, you know, Dad, he said laws can be flexible when it's for the greater good. That was the first time I heard him say greater good. And that was the moment I knew I'd better remember every word. I set my glass down. The faint clink of glass on wood was sharp final. Greater good, I repeated. Son, a house isn't just an asset, it's a promise. No one spoke. A breeze moved through the backyard trees, rustling dry leaves cold against the warm night. Then Mark broke the silence. Dad, you live alone in that big place. Maybe it's time to think ahead. If something happened to you, who would take care of you? I met his gaze, slow and steady. Don't worry about me, Mark. And don't sell what isn't yours to take care of me. Laura stepped in softly. Dad, he didn't mean it that way. He's just worried about you. I smiled faintly. Are you worried about me, Laura? Or about your husband's restaurant that's bleeding money? The air tightened. Mark's jaw flexed. His hand gripped the wine glass so hard his knuckles turned white. The dark red swirled dangerously near the rim. I'd seen that look before in people buried under debt, in men who'd already decided to cross the line. But this time that look belonged to my son-in-law. Mark lowered his voice, forced a chuckle. Dad, come on. I was just making conversation. But if you ever change your mind, I could help you sell it for a very good price. I leaned back. Let me tell you something, Mark. I spent 30 years appraising property, and I learned that the true value of a house isn't what people are willing to pay for it. It's who's still living inside. He smiled again, but the corners of his mouth didn't move. Only his eyes did, flat, cold, calculating. The dinner went on in silence. The faint ticking of the wall clock joined the clatter of knives and forks. Laura dabbed her eyes with a napkin quietly. And I realized she was hiding something. When a daughter hides something from her father, it's rarely out of guilt. It's out of fear that he might find out the truth. After dinner, Mark poured me another glass. The wine reached the brim, red and thick as blood. To your health, Dad, he said, lifting his glass. I didn't lift mine. I just smiled. Health is good, Mark, but you should pray your honor stays intact. He froze, eyes flickering just for a second, then laughed loudly. You really are the toughest man I've ever met, Dad. When I stood to leave, Laura was by the window staring into the dark yard. The light reflected against her face, soft and uncertain. A woman torn between love and guilt. I walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded, not turning to me. I'm fine, Dad. Just tired. I'll call you tomorrow. I nodded back, but something in my chest sank, that quiet heaviness that settles when you realize a room once filled with warmth has gone cold. That night I didn't know it yet, but it was my last dinner as the owner of my home, and the people sitting across the table were the ones about to steal it from me. I left their house. The road toward I-5 was empty, just the sound of tires over wet pavement and the occasional sigh of wind. I turned on the radio, then switched it off. Music felt pointless. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse, Laura standing in the doorway, light spilling behind her like a fading halo. Mark appeared, his hand settling on her shoulder. He whispered something. She nodded. He closed the door. The light went out. Betrayal doesn't always begin with an action. Sometimes it begins with a dinner, a question about value, and a look shared between two people who already know they're about to do the unforgivable. The sound of clinking silverware echoed in my mind, blending with the steady rain that had begun to fall again. August 2025, Seattle was raining like it always does. Rain in this city never falls hard. It just lingers. It clings to windows, seeps through collars, and settles into your bones like a wordless warning. I was standing outside the Seattle Heart Institute, the most prestigious cardiac center in the state, where a single consultation costs more than my monthly pension. Laura had booked the appointment, calling it a late birthday gift. "Dad let us take you," she'd said. "Mark and I arranged everything." I didn't want to go, but in her voice there was something half affection, half control. Sometimes the elderly stay silent, not because they're weak, but because they're tired of having to doubt. Mark showed up early that morning. The fog was thick along Harborview Drive, the world muted under a white blur. He drove a black SUV, the smell of new leather fighting with cheap cologne. "Ready for your big day, Mr. Hayes?" he said with a grin. I looked at him. "Just call me Edward." He smirked. "All right then, Edward." The way he said my name, it felt like ownership, not respect. In the rearview mirror, his eyes caught mine. They weren't worried eyes. They were satisfied ones. Laura sat in the passenger seat, scrolling her phone. Without looking at me, she said softly, "I filled out all the forms already. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, okay? This is for you." I nodded but said nothing. Children sometimes use care as a key, but what they open isn't your heart, it's your wallet. 3 hours later, I sat in the exam room, back against a white wall that smelled of antiseptic. Everything was spotless, expensive, and cold. "Relax, Mr. Hayes," the nurse said, placing electrodes on my chest. "We just need to monitor your heartbeat for a few minutes." I closed my eyes. The monitor beeped steadily. Beep, beep, beep. A rhythm too perfect to trust. When she stepped out, the silence was thick enough to hear the rain against the glass. I reached for my phone, an old iPhone cracked at the corner. No messages. Just one new email. From Unity Real Estate. Escrow subject. Deposit confirmed, $875,000. My stomach tightened. I hadn't sold anything. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Dear Mr. Hayes, this message confirms the receipt of $875,000 from Unity Holdings LLC for the sale of property at 124 Harborview Drive, Tacoma." My house. Harborview Drive. I hadn't signed a thing, hadn't agreed to sell. The monitor beside me spiked. Beep, 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 the nurse burst in, alarmed. "Mr. Hayes, are you all right? Your heart rate." "I'm fine." I cut her off. "Just a little dizzy." She didn't believe me, but left anyway. I sat there, eyes locked on the screen, and suddenly everything lined up in my mind. Mark's question at dinner about property value. Laura's insistence that they only wanted to help. And now this email. I didn't need a second guess. Someone had sold my house. I called Laura. 2 rings. Dad. Are you done? What did the doctor say, Laura? I said her name slowly, each word deliberate. I just got an email. $875,000. The house on Harbor View Drive. Do you know anything about this silence? 1 second. 2. Then came her voice, too cheerful, too fast. Oh, you saw it? Surprised we sold it, Dad. You have $75,000 in your account now. We used the rest to pay off Mark's debt. The restaurant's safe, I stood. What did you do, Ad? That house is too big for you. It's cold, empty, expensive. We just wanted to help you start fresh. We thought it was the right thing to do. You had no right. Don't say that, Dad. We did it for you. Mom would have wanted you to rest. We even found you a beautiful senior apartment near the coast, 24/7 care, ocean view, Laura. My voice dropped flat and steel cold. You just did something that can't be undone. Dad, please don't be angry. I hung up. In her sweetness, I could taste betrayal. Not bitter, not sharp. Sweet like honey laced with poison. Outside rain streaked across the window, each drop tracing the glow of the Heart Institute sign in pale blue. Down in the parking lot, I saw them, Laura and Mark sharing an umbrella, his arm around her shoulder, both smiling. The kind of smile that comes when people think they've gotten away with it. Not every betrayer knows they're a betrayer. Some just convince themselves they're helping. But when you help by stealing a man's dignity, that's not love, that's permission. I walked out of the room. Mr. Hayes, sir, you can't leave, the nurse called. I didn't stop. The hallway was long and cold. Framed photos of happy families lined the walls. Irony. I thought I was standing in a heart clinic, and mine had just exploded in a way no doctor could fix. The elevator doors opened. Soft music played a meaningless melody against the steady burn inside my chest. When the doors slid apart again, Mark was waiting, still smiling. Doctor says you're in great shape. Laura's already in the car, he said, patting my shoulder. See, we're taking care of you. I looked at him, didn't smile. Son, I said quietly, thank you for your concern. He nodded, missing the weight of the words. I turned, stepping into the rain. He called after me. Where are you going? I need some air. But you don't have a car. I didn't look back. Just said, that's all right. I know the way home. I spent my life appraising homes. No one ever taught me how to appraise betrayal. Now I know its price, $875,000 and 1 soul. I stopped at the curb. Headlights shimmered off wet asphalt. My phone buzzed again. Bank alert. Deposit $75,000 from Unity Holdings, LLC. The blue text glowed on the screen like a knife's edge. I turned the phone off, slipped it into my pocket. My shoes squelched with every step, soft, wet, forgotten sounds. No one looked at me. No one knew a father had just been sold out. They think I'm old, weak, forgetful. But a man who's spent his life finding mistakes in contracts never misses a typo. I walked through the terminal under the bus canopy. Rain hit the roof, each drop a slow tick of a clock counting down to reckoning. On my phone screen, still faintly lit, the subject line reflected in my eyes. Deposit confirmed, $875,000. Betrayal often begins with a phone call, but it always ends in a courtroom. That afternoon, the rain hadn't stopped. Tacoma was wrapped in a gray mist, the kind that makes everything feel temporary, like the city itself was hiding something only the patient could see. I drove my old pickup down Pacific Avenue, the wipers groaning in rhythm each pass, whispering the same thing. The past doesn't end, it just changes the way it comes back. On the seat beside me sat a thick yellow envelope, the logo Unity Real Estate Escrow. I'd stared at it a dozen times during the drive and still couldn't believe my name appeared on a sale I never made. There are two things people only believe in once they've lost them their health, and the honesty of the ones they raised. The brick building of Berger and Associates appeared after the curve. Old red walls, gold-lettered sign dulled by the rain. Through the fogged glass door, passing headlights looked like streaks of molten silver. When I stepped inside, a bell chimed softly. A voice came from behind the reception counter, deep, familiar Edward Hayes. Only you would show up on time in a storm like this. Tom Berger, my old friend. 48 now. Average height, salt and pepper hair, dark vest tie loosened. He came around the counter and shook my hand. I heard your voice on the phone, he said, and knew it was bad. I nodded. Bad. Try career-defining bad. Tom's office smelled the same old paper, pine wood, and roasted coffee. The walls were lined with framed verdicts and settlements. Elder fraud case. $1. 2M restored financial exploitation verdict 2022. Only this time the victim sitting across from him was me. He poured coffee, placed it in front of me. Start from the beginning, Ed. I slid the envelope across the desk. The house on Harbor View Drive. I never sold it, but the money's gone. Here are the escrow files and the confirmation email. He opened it. His expression changed by the second line. After a minute, he looked up, voice low. The signer's name reads, Edward Hayes. I gave a short, bitter laugh. They couldn't spell my name right, but they were smart enough to forge a notary. Tom pulled the folder closer, using a magnifier to study the ink. The stroke pressure's off, the signature's printed. This is a color scan, not an original pen mark. He flipped to the next page. Power of attorney. Did you ever sign this? I shook my head. Never saw it before today. He sighed. Exactly what I thought. Forged power of attorney. That's federal-level fraud. He turned to the last page, the notary stamp. Name Karen Mills, Notary Public, Washington State. Tom typed quickly on his laptop, pulling up the state registry. 30 seconds later, he turned the screen toward me. Nothing. No notary by that name exists in Washington. The stamp's fake. I stared at the red ink mark, thicker than the others, pressed hard, as if the forger thought boldness could make a lie look true. I said quietly, like someone trying to convince themselves they're right by writing the lie a little darker. Tom flipped to the escrow page. The receiving company isn't North Sound Title like the contract says. It's Unity Holdings, LLC. The name hit me. I saw that in the transfer email. Tom's fingers flew over the keyboard. He stopped mid-scroll, then looked up slowly. Registered March 18, 2025. Owner Mark Turner. I froze. Mark. My son-in-law. The air thickened. The only sound was the clock ticking, dry, mechanical. I turned toward the rain-streaked window. Drops ran down like ink bleeding through paper. So I said, voice low, steady. He set up his own company, took the money through a fake escrow fraud, organized deception. Tom nodded. And the forged power of attorney seals it. It would have been perfect if you hadn't seen that email by mistake. I exhaled slowly, then let out a dry chuckle. One typo in haze. That's all it took. The price of carelessness when you betray the man who taught you how to read contracts. Tom leaned back, studying me. You want me to go to the police? I shook my head. Not yet. Let them think I'm old, tired, helpless. That illusion's worth more than any evidence right now. His eyes narrowed. So what's your plan, Select? Every document, every wire trail, every signature. I'll make sure he's bound by the same papers he forged. Tom's lips twitched into a grim smile. I've never heard you say collect like that, Ed. Sounds more like a death sentence than a strategy. He grabbed a pad and started writing. Here's what we'll need. Bank statements from you and Unity Holdings. The original purchase contract. Escrow receipts and fee records. The notary's fake ID trail. If it's solid, we'll go to the state attorney's office and the IRS. The IRS, I asked. He nodded. An unreported $875,000 transaction. That's tax fraud. Once the IRS steps in, you won't need a lawsuit. They'll do the digging for you. I smiled faintly. Poetic, isn't it? He won't go down for betraying his father-in-law. He'll go down for cheating the government. Tom chuckled, pouring us both more coffee. You know, Ed, he said softly, I remember something you told me years ago. Justice doesn't come from courtrooms. It comes from whoever keeps the records longer. I nodded. Still true. The coffee was hot, bitter, real, a taste I'd almost forgotten. Outside, the rain grew heavier. The streetlights bled into the wet glass, casting faint golden stripes across the wall. I stood gathering the files. Tom, I said quietly. My silence isn't fear. Silence lets me hear the liar's voice clearly. He nodded, sliding another envelope toward me. New power of attorney. From now on, I represent you. No one, not even your daughter, can sign for you again. I signed. Slow, firm, unshaking. It felt like signing the first page of a lawful revenge. Tom looked at me, eyes narrowing. Ed, you were the best appraiser I ever met. Now it's time to appraise justice itself. I smiled. Justice doesn't have a market price, Tom. It only has value when someone's willing to pay for it. I left the office near 6. The rain was heavier now. Streetlights reflected in puddles like molten silver ribbons. As I stepped down the stairs, my phone buzzed. A new email from IRS Audit Notice. Subject: Unreported Real Estate Transaction. Inquiry required. I stared at it, the corner of my mouth lifting. The government just noticed. When real justice starts moving, you don't need to shout. You just stand still and watch. The voice in my head grew calm, deliberate. They think I've lost everything. But they forget a man who's lived by numbers knows how to make every number into evidence. I walked into the rain. The wind was sharp against my face. Drops splashed on the folder in my hand, smudging the words Unity Holdings LLC, but not enough to erase them. I gripped the folder tighter, a silent oath written in paper and ink. No yelling, no threats. Just quiet work and let the law do the talking. I moved down the sidewalk, the light glinting across my face, aged worn, but with eyes sharp as steel. From the harbor, a ship's horn echoed through the mist, low, distant, and cold. Justice doesn't rush. It moves slow, but when it arrives, it brings fire. That night, Tacoma was cold enough for breath to turn into mist. The wind swept in from the bay, carrying the smell of salt and wet pine. I drove back to my small rented house on the outskirts, thin walls, creaking floors, and a lamp that flickered like it too had grown tired of surviving. The room held only a few things: a chipped coffee mug, an old oak table, and a cedar box sitting in the corner of the cabinet. Margaret's box. The woman who had held this family together until the family she built sold away the very legacy she protected. I sat down and lifted the lid. The faint scent of old cedar mixed with her perfume still clinging to the lining of a blouse. Inside were her wedding ring, a few faded photos, and an old silver-rimmed phone, the screen cracked, but still breathing faint light. I plugged it in. A dim orange glow blinked on. One saved voicemail. Date November 2nd, 2019. I pressed play. Her voice came through fragile but clear. Ed, if you're hearing this, I'm probably not there anymore. Promise me. Don't ever let anyone take that house from you. That's where I'll always be, even when I'm not. I froze. Time stopped. The sound of rain faded, leaving only her voice, thin, distant, but stronger than any written oath. Some promises don't need paper to exist. They carve themselves into you deeper than any notary's seal. I sat still for a long time, then opened my laptop. The cold blue light spilled across my face, 70 years of lines wear, and something new focus. A new email draft blinked on screen. Subject: suspicious real estate transaction. Potential escrow fraud. I attached every file I had: the fake contract, the escrow email, the Unity Holdings account. Recipient: IRS Fraud Division, Western Region. Then I typed slow but steady. To whom it may concern, my property was sold without my consent. The escrow account appears fraudulent. Attached are documents for verification. Please investigate the transaction linked to Unity Holdings LLC owner Mark Turner. Thank you. Edward Hayes. I read it twice. No anger, no threats. Just clarity, the kind that comes only after you've lost enough not to fear losing more. I clicked send. The quiet whoosh filled the room. Small sound, but the silence trembled right after it, as if the world had just exhaled. I leaned back in my chair. Outside, a distant ship horn groaned from the harbor, the same sound Margaret loved on sleepless nights. She'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, light catching the gray in her hair, and she'd say, "People can take everything from you, only if you let them believe you've stopped fighting." She was right. And tonight, I proved I hadn't stopped. I reached for an old notebook, the one I'd used to record property appraisals for 3 decades. Every page once filled with square footage, lot prices, closing dates. Now I began writing something different. Unity Holdings, LLC. March 2025, Mark Turner. $875,000 unreported income. Fake notary, Karen Mills. Forged power of attorney. Confirmed justice pending. I underlined the last line. Hard. Every act of revenge starts small. Not with fists, not with shouting. Just one email sent from a quiet room by a man who once trusted too much. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the fog swallow the streetlights. The wind pressed against the window pane in slow, steady pulses, like the heartbeat of a house I'd lost. And in that heartbeat, I could almost see her, Margaret, sitting across from me, smiling. Promise me you'll keep it, Ed, no matter what. I whispered back, I'm keeping it, Maggie. Not for the house, for you. At dawn, my inbox pinged. From IRS Fraud Division, subject: case assigned. Reference ID WRF 10825. Thank you for your report. Your case has been forwarded to the Fraud Investigation Department. I stared at the line for a long moment, drawing a deep breath, the first clean breath after a long winter. When I stepped outside, Tacoma was still damp, but the eastern sky glowed silver. A new day. A thin light, the kind that doesn't blind you, but reminds you you're still here. I walked toward the cafe at the corner, the one that always smelled like burnt toast and old hope. The morning radio hummed from a dusty speaker. The story of an elderly homeowner locked out by his daughter continues to gain traction online. Police have reopened the investigation. I stopped. A small television over the counter showed the footage, me standing in the rain. Suitcase at my feet. Laura's voice yelling through the door. "You're basically homeless, Dad and Mrs. Walker," my neighbor telling a reporter. "He's a good man." No one deserves that. People in the cafe murmured, but I felt no shame, only relief. Sometimes justice doesn't start in court. It starts with a phone camera in the hands of a neighbor. I dialed Tom Berger. He answered immediately, his tone dry but awake. I saw it, Ed. The whole state did. "Don't worry, we're past chasing justice. Justice is coming to you now." "Then let's get ready for it," I said. "Gather every duplicate, every receipt. When the IRS opens their file, I want them to find everything waiting." "You got it," Tom said, then paused. "And Ed, get some sleep. Legal revenge is a marathon." I smiled faintly. Sleep can wait. A promise can't. That night back in my small room, Margaret's phone glowed faintly, battery low. I pressed play one last time. Her voice filled the room again, soft, warm, eternal. "Ed, promise me you'll never let anyone take that home from you." I closed my eyes. Every word sank deep like an oath carved in stone. Not every voice fades when the person is gone. Some stay to remind you something's still unfinished. I opened my notebook, wrote a new line. Phase 1. Complete. Phase 2. Begin, follow the money. I closed the book. Outside Harborview Drive shimmered faintly through the mist, the battlefield I once called home. I don't want revenge. I just want to keep a promise. But sometimes to keep a promise, you have to teach betrayal what loss truly feels like. A week later. Tacoma woke under a pale kind of sunlight, the color of gold that had lost its warmth. It spilled through the tall windows of Berger & Associates, glinting off paper edges and half-empty coffee cups. I sat across from Tom. Between us lay a document that had cost me my home, my peace, and nearly my faith in family, a forged power of attorney. In my old job, I used to read thousands of contracts, I said. Every signature, every pen stroke tells a story. And now, I only need one glance to know which story is a lie. Tom spread the document flat on the table, a metal ruler crossing its surface. "You see this, Ed, the ink is pressed too hard. Someone printed this signature." I leaned closer. The Y in Hayes curled the wrong way, the tail arched up, not down. I pointed. "This isn't mine. I always pull the line downward, never push. A forger can imitate handwriting, but not muscle memory." Tom nodded, jotting notes. "That's our first pillar. Fake stroke pressure. Fake notary. Fake escrow." He paused, tapping the desk. "One last piece, Ed. We need to follow the money." Outside, the wind carried the faint call of a ship's horn. I stared at the rain-streaked window. "He thinks the money's clean," I murmured. "But dirty money always leaves a scent." Tom turned his laptop toward me. We filed a request with the Washington State Fraud Division to trace the transfers, but something came in before they did. He opened an email. From IRS Fraud Division, subject audit alert. Suspicious real estate transaction, $875,000. Tom read aloud. We have detected an unreported $875,000 transaction with possible escrow manipulation. Entities involved Unity Holdings, LLC, and Mark Turner. He looked up, eyes gleaming. The IRS just stepped in. Mark thinks he's safe, but he's officially on a federal radar. I stared at the screen. Not joy, not relief. Just that cold, even feeling like a padlock clicking shut. Justice doesn't shout. It just needs one valid signature and one forged one. Tom opened another file. Here, Ed. Look at this. He slid me a bank statement from Unity Holdings, LLC. August 16th, deposit, $875,000. August 19th. Withdrawal, $860,000 wired to Blue Fern Bistro, Inc. I exhaled slowly. He laundered it through his own restaurant, like cutting his own bread with a stolen knife. Tom nodded. And now the IRS will ask why a failing restaurant suddenly received nearly $1 million in unreported income. The net was tightening. And for once, not around me. Tom leaned back. We're ready for phase 2. We'll prove the power of attorney is entirely forged. I nodded. I kept my original signature file from 2018 when Margaret and I established our trust. The truth will be in the lines. I took a faded photocopy from my briefcase. 2 signatures side by side. Edward Hayes and Edward Hayes, one a live fluid, the other stiff, breathless. Tom shook his head. The forger didn't realize a signature is a heartbeat. You can mimic the shape, but not the pulse. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, the clock ticking above us. I spent my life appraising property, I said quietly. Now I'm appraising the morality of my own child. And I've learned the value of conscience depreciates faster than real estate. Tom reached for another folder. Listen, Ed. If we can prove the fake power of attorney, the fake escrow, and the unreported income, the IRS will automatically trigger a criminal investigation. We won't need to sue. They'll handle the rest. I nodded slowly. I don't want the money back, Tom. I just want justice to sit them where they belong at the interrogation table. That afternoon, I drove home under clearer skies. On the radio, the anchor's voice was calm, clinical, breaking news. The IRS has opened an investigation into a suspicious property sale in Tacoma. The transaction, valued at over $875,000, appears tied to the Blue Fern Bistro restaurant chain. I turned the radio off, smiling faintly. I didn't need them to say my name as long as they said his. That evening, back at my desk, I opened my notebook. Yesterday's line still unfinished, phase 2. Begin, follow the money. I added underneath IRS, active. Tom, preparing deposition. Target, Mark Turner. The lamplight hit the ink just right. The words seemed carved into the page. I paused, flipping open an old photo album. There she was, Laura, age 10, smiling in front of Harborview Drive, holding a hand-painted sign that said, "Welcome home." I whispered to the photo, "You once knew what that word meant, Laura. Now you've sold it. What did you think you were buying in return?" The phone rang. Tom's voice came through, quick, clipped. Ed just got confirmation the IRS requested full financial disclosure from Mark Turner. They're also pulling 3 years of Blue Fern tax filings. This won't be small. I let the silence stretch, then said quietly, "Justice delayed, but not denied. Tom chuckled. This time, Ed, it's right on schedule. That night, I didn't turn the lights on. I sat in the dark moonlight spilling across stacks of paper. Each document a fragment of truth, each page one step closer to consequence. They think I'll crumble because of age, but they forget men who've spent a lifetime reading ink can also read the traces of guilt. Morning came gray and clean. I found a text on my phone from an unknown number. Dad, I know about the IRS. They called me. Please don't make this worse. I'll explain everything. Laura. I read it twice. Didn't reply. Margaret's voice echoed in my head. Don't ever let anyone take that house from you. I stepped out onto the balcony. The bay shimmered under a thin strip of silver light. Somewhere in the distance, a sound clicked metal locking into place. Not a door. Justice. They took my house. But I'll reclaim what they can't buy, my dignity. Friday noon, Seattle hung under a sky the color of lead. The clouds stacked like ink stains across the horizon. My phone buzzed. A message from Laura. Dad, Mark wants to talk. Please come to Blue Fern. We just want to explain. I sat in my car for a long time, engine off, watching the sign. The Blue Fern Bistro. Mark once called it his lifelong dream. Now the glowing blue letters looked more like a confession written in neon. In all my years of appraising property, I've walked through hundreds of beautiful buildings. None ever felt as empty as the home of a liar. I pushed open the door. The restaurant was quiet, too quiet for lunch hour. A few scattered tables. Staff pretending to polish glasses that didn't need polishing. Mark sat in the corner booth, crisp white shirt sleeves rolled, a forced smile. Laura beside him, eyes red, fingers twisting a napkin. I approached the table without a word. Mark stood, hand outstretched. Dad, thank you for coming. We just want to talk as a family. I stared at his hand. Didn't take it. Families don't forge documents. The air thickened. Soft jazz leaked from the ceiling speakers, thin artificial stabbing at the silence. Mark sat again, smoothing his shirt. Look, I know you're upset, but you need care, Dad. That house is too big, too old. We were just trying to make life easier for you. I met his eyes. Easier. By stealing what your wife's mother left behind and funneling it into this place to cover an $875,000 hole. He blinked hard. Dad. I don't lie. The IRS already knows. I've seen every transfer, every date. Some apologies don't come from guilt, I said quietly. They come from the survival instinct of a drowning man. Laura's voice cracked. Dad, please. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were trying to save the restaurant, to save Mark's career. I was just scared. Scared of losing everything. I looked at her, my voice low, precise. You weren't afraid of losing everything, Laura. You were afraid of losing money. What you should have feared losing, you already threw away. Tears welled. But I'd cried enough that night outside the locked door. Mark's tone hardened. Enough. You talk like you're perfect. You hoarded your money, lived like a miser, and left us to struggle. I gave a small, bitter laugh. I wasn't hoarding Mark. I was preserving. I didn't gamble, didn't hide behind shell companies, didn't forge a notary stamp to rob my father-in-law. The last line cut clean. His jaw tightened. His fingers clenched around the wine glass. You paid your debts, I said, voice even with someone else's memories, and called it love. Laura broke down. We did this for you, Dad, for you. I leaned in, eyes cold. No, you did it for fear, not love. If you did it for love, you would have asked. If you did it for love, you wouldn't have changed the locks. She sobbed into her hands. A few diners turned. Servers froze mid-step, pretending to clean the counter. That's when I realized betrayal doesn't start with the act itself. It starts when someone convinces themselves that love is a good enough excuse for theft. I pulled a slim envelope from my coat, placed it gently on the table. You wanted to talk? Here's how I talk. Mark forced a smile. Another contract, Dad. Can't you ever stop living by rules? Rules, I said softly, are the only thing that keep people from turning into animals. He opened the envelope. Inside, a color printout of the fake escrow email, the Unity Holdings LLC seal, and the line "Deposit confirmed, $875,000. Color drained from his face. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He looked at Laura, then at me. Where did you get this? He whispered. From the only place you thought no one could reach, the federal banking system. I rose from my chair, the sound of wood scraping quietly against tile. One last piece of advice, Mark. When you lie to save yourself, make sure the person you're deceiving hasn't spent his entire life finding errors in documents. Laura grabbed my wrist as I turned. Dad, please. I know we were wrong. But Mark didn't. I gently freed her hand. Laura, do you even know what clause your mother added to the trust? She looked down. Silent. No one can sell the house while Edward is alive, I said. Now you understand why she wrote that. Laura collapsed into tears. Mark sat frozen, his false composure cracking. A few heads turned from nearby tables. I looked at him one last time. You haven't just lost money, Mark. You've lost something you'll never buy back: respect. When I left that table, I knew the game had changed. I didn't need to shout. I just had to let the system speak for me. Outside, the wind hit hard, carrying the mixed scent of wine grease and ocean air. I looked back once. The blue fern sign flickered in the gray light, the neon heartbeat of something already dying. You saved your restaurant by selling your honor. Now watch how fast honor collapses compared to revenue. That evening, Tom Berger called. His tone was sharp, energized. Ed, I just got word from the IRS. The audit is officially open. Mark Turner is under investigation for escrow fraud and tax evasion. We'll have a deposition next week. I answered quietly to, let's see how he explains his own signature under oath. Tom chuckled, the sound dark and amused. You're going to love that part, Ed, especially when they remind him that perjury carries prison time. That night, I sat alone in the apartment. Laptop open, replaying the clip Mrs. Walker had filmed Laura screaming through the rain. You're basically homeless, Dad. I watched myself on screen. Silent, soaked. They called me homeless. But the truly homeless are the ones who sell their souls to keep a roof built on lies. I closed the video, opened the cabinet, took out two things: our wedding photo and the escrow email. One symbol of love, one of betrayal. I placed them side by side. Whispered, Maggie, you once said, keep the house because that's where the soul lives. I promised you, and I'm keeping that promise by taking it back. I pulled out my phone, typed a message to Tom. Phase 3 begins. Prepare deposition. The blue glow lit my reflection in the screen, a face no longer weary, no longer afraid, only focused. Once I appraised houses, now I appraise character, and I've done the math. They owe me everything. That afternoon, Tacoma wore its grief like a second skin. Clouds hung low and gray, layered across the sky like steel plates sealing the city in. I drove through wet streets, the smell of salt and metal rolling in from the harbor. Each gust of wind rattled the car windows, whispering fragments of a life I used to have. The road to Harbor View Drive was muscle memory by now, but every time I returned, it felt more foreign, like the ghost of a place pretending to be home. I stopped in front of the white two-story house. Once it was the heart of everything, 40 years of Sunday mornings, Christmas dinners, and laughter echoing through its walls. Now it stood hollow, stripped a skeleton of what used to be a promise. The gate hung open. Inside the yard was a graveyard of memories, our wedding photo, a hand-stitched rug, and the old oak rocking chair Margaret used to sit in every Sunday morning, all tossed into the mud, all soaking in rain. Some losses don't scream. They just sit quietly, like a crack in the wood that never bleeds, but never heals. I walked up the stone path, gravel crunching under my shoes. The air was thick with paint and mildew, the smell of something trying to forget what it once was. I knelt, lifting the shattered photo frame. The glass had fractured into a spiderweb, rainwater streaming down the young faces of me and Margaret. I wiped it gently with my sleeve. Her smile was still there, soft, steady, trusting. I wondered what she'd say if she saw this, now our daughter selling off her mother's memories for spare cash. I stood there for a long time. Then out of habit I pulled out my phone. Old instincts die hard. An appraiser always checks the listings. I opened Facebook Marketplace, scrolled through local posts, and then there it was. A title that stopped me cold: antique rocking chair, $100. Pickup only. I tapped it. The photo loaded slowly, but when it did, I felt something tighten inside my chest. It was hers. The honey-colored oak, the rounded arms, and that small, carved floral pattern I'd made for her on Christmas 1985. Even the tiny crack by the armrest, the one from her wedding ring brushing the wood as she turned a page. I zoomed in. There it was, the faint scratch from her hand, the one I could have recognized blindfolded. Underneath the photo, the caption read, "Antique rocking chair. Well maintained. From family estate. $100 firm. Seller Turner. Family resale." The name made me laugh, a dry, bitter sound that barely reached the air. They didn't just steal the house. They stole the word family to sell what's left of it. I saved every photo, took screenshots, then sat there staring at the glowing phone in the dim afternoon light. On the screen, Margaret's chair looked so small, as if the world had resized her into a trinket someone could bargain for. A gust of wind swept across the yard. The wedding photo slipped from my hand, hit the concrete, and shattered. The sound clean, sharp, like something breaking that had been waiting to break for years. I crouched down, picked up the largest shard. My reflection wavered in it, old, tired, but the eyes still alive, burning. I whispered almost to myself, "All right, Margaret. I understand now. This isn't about a house anymore. This is about justice." I walked back to the truck, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out the small cedar box I'd kept there. Margaret's box. I set it on the passenger seat and lifted the lid. That faint scent of cedar rose up, warm and familiar, the smell of autumn mornings, coffee brewing, and her laughter echoing down the hallway. Inside was the old silver-edged phone. Its screen was cracked. The battery icon blinked red, 2%. One voicemail saved. I hit play. Her voice filled the cab, soft but steady. "Ed, if you're hearing this, I'm probably not there anymore. But remember, don't let anyone take that house from you. Not for me, but for yourself. A house isn't walls or roof. It's the place where you keep your promises. I closed my eyes. The sound of rain tapping the roof merged with her words, a lullaby for the living. And in that moment, I saw everything clearly. The dinner, the forged papers, the chair, Laura's tearful eyes, all pieces of the same broken picture, leading me to one conclusion. People confuse revenge with justice. Revenge makes you feel powerful. Justice makes you feel at peace. I choose peace. I took out my old appraisal notebook, the one filled with numbers and dates from 30 years of work. On a clean page, I wrote Phase 3. Document everything below it. Facebook listing. Rocking chair, $100, user Turner. Family resale trust violation. Margaret Hayes clause. Emotional property. Not financial justice must know the price they put on love. I closed the book, then drove home in silence. That night, the wind from the bay slipped through the window blinds, stirring the curtains like ghosts at ease. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and replayed Margaret's voicemail again. "Promise me, Ed, you'll never let anyone take this home from you," I whispered back. "I promise, and I'll do it your way, with dignity." On my screen folder after folder of evidence glowed faintly the fake escrow, the forged signature, the marketplace post, and the photo of the broken chair. I selected them all, created a new directory, Case Hayes, Jval. Turner then locked it with a password. The icon turned into a small padlock. Once they called me homeless. Now I hold the keys that can strip them of everything. Near midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Tom Berger, Ed, IRS, has escalated the case to the Criminal Investigation Division. I'll need your personal evidence. Prepare for deposition. I replied, all ready, then looked over at Margaret's photo on the table, her smile steady as ever. Justice starts with a single click. But what truly drives it is the memory they dared to violate. I stood by the window. Rain traced the glass in silver lines. My reflection wavered, older, colder, and behind it, I could almost see her smiling. They priced my memories at $100. I'll make sure justice recalculates at the cost of a soul. Outside, the wind howled through the eaves, and through the faint static of Margaret's old phone, her voice returned a whisper through time. Never let anyone take this home from you. 3 weeks after the confrontation at Blue Fern, I thought everything had gone still like a pond after a stone sinks. But justice, when it comes, doesn't knock. It spreads. I learned that on a Monday morning when my phone began to ring, nonstop calls, texts, notifications lighting up the screen like sirens. I opened Facebook, and there it was. A single video shared everywhere. Headline in bold, elderly father locked out by his own daughter. The thumbnail showed me standing in the rain suitcase at my feet. In the clip, Laura's voice trembled through the downpour. "Dad, please stop this. You don't live here anymore. You're basically homeless." Mrs. Walker, my elderly neighbor, had filmed it that night. I'd seen her across the street, phone raised, never imagining her video would become a storm. Within 48 hours, it had over 2 million views. Thousands of comments poured in, unbelievable. How could anyone do this to their father? Justice for Mr. Hayes. I scrolled through them all. Each line was a strange mix of cold and warmth. Part of me felt exposed, my pain made public. But beneath the embarrassment, something stirred. For the first time since Margaret's death, someone believed me. When no one listens to your truth, sometimes justice finds its voice in someone else's recording. By afternoon, the story hit Seattle local news. A reporter spoke over B-roll of me at the front steps. A 70-year-old Tacoma man was reportedly locked out of his own home by his daughter and son-in-law. The video filmed by a neighbor has sparked public outrage over possible elder financial exploitation. My face filled the screen beneath the Channel 5 logo. I didn't need to watch. The whole city was watching for me. Then Laura called. Her voice trembled. "Dad, that video, did you know everyone's talking about it? My office. I can't even walk in." I was quiet for a few seconds, then said slowly, "Remember, Laura, you told me I was homeless. Now the entire country knows and they're asking why." She broke down. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "No," I said softly. "You meant it. You just didn't expect it to echo." I hung up. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a calm sense that truth had started walking on its own. 3 days later, a knock came at my door. Mrs. Walker stood there, neat hair pinned back, a large envelope clutched in both hands. "Ed," she said, voice trembling. "I never thought the video would spread like that. But you should know hundreds of people messaged me. They wanted to know if you're all right. I told them you're fine, just waiting to be heard." She handed me the envelope. I printed some of the comments. "I thought you should read them." Inside were dozens of pages, words from strangers. "He deserves his home back. Someone start a legal fund for this man. If Mr. Hayes lived near me, I'd take him in." I read line after line, eyes blurring. I thought I'd been fighting alone. But sometimes compassion runs deeper than blood. That evening, Mrs. Walker appeared on Seattle Public Radio. The host asked, "Why did you record that video?" She answered simply, "Because no one should ever be called homeless while standing on their own porch." The clip went viral again, shared over 300,000 times in one night. The next morning, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Hayes." "This is Richard Collins, president of the Harbor View HOA. We had an emergency meeting." I frowned. "About me?" "Yes. We saw the video. Couldn't believe it. If you need a place to stay, I have a guest house out back. Stay there until this clears. We're standing with you, Ed, not because of the video, but because we know you're an honorable man." I swallowed hard. At 70, a simple sentence like that can make your hands shake. "Thank you, Richard. I'll be all right. But thank you for believing." At my age, I've learned justice doesn't just live in courtrooms. Sometimes it lives in the eyes of strangers who still know right from wrong. Everything shifted after that. When I went to the market, people recognized me. A middle-aged woman at the coffee stand touched my shoulder. "You're Mr. Hayes, right? I saw that video. You reminded me of my dad. He died in a nursing home after his kids stopped visiting. Don't ever let them take your dignity." I just nodded. No words needed. That night, Tom Berger called. His voice carried the energy of 10 lawyers at once. "Ed, you won't believe this." After the video blew up, the senior legal aid office got flooded with volunteer calls. Half a dozen firms offered to take your case pro bono. "You've got a full team now." I chuckled softly. "Strange, isn't it, Tom? I spent years appraising the value of houses, and now the world is publicly appraising my character." Tom laughed. "And this time the market price is way higher." The pressure crushed Laura and Mark. Inside sources said Blue Fern Bistro lost half its customers in 2 weeks. One-star reviews flooded Yelp won't eat at a place owned by a man who stole from his father-in-law. They shut down posting a fake renovation sign. Everyone knew better. A text from Laura came that evening. "Dad, I'm sorry. Everything's falling apart. The press friends, even neighbors. I can't handle this. I didn't answer. Justice doesn't need comfort. It needs silence so the guilty can finally hear themselves. They once thought I was powerless. But in this world, no one is powerless once the truth starts speaking in millions of voices. That weekend, Richard Collins invited me to a neighborhood gathering. The HOA lawn smelled of pine and charcoal. About 20 neighbors showed up, bringing food-folding chairs, quiet solidarity. A young woman spoke up, "Mr. Hayes, we don't know you well, but if you'd like, we can start a community legal fund. Don't let this case fade away." I smiled. Thank you. But justice doesn't need donations, only people brave enough to speak. Silence. Then nods all around. It was enough. They say the internet spreads lies, but sometimes it becomes the fairest courtroom of all, because it drags liars into the light. That night I sat at my small desk. The video had reached 3.1 million views. The newest comment stopped me cold. If his daughter can sell his house, wait until she sees how the world sells her excuses. I smiled faintly, tiredly, but with peace. I don't need to raise my voice to be heard. The truth is loud enough. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. The TV replayed the Seattle news coverage while rain tapped the windows in slow rhythm. Somewhere I thought I could hear Margaret's voice again, steady, forgiving, proud. Thursday morning, October 16th, 2025. Tacoma had finally cleared after nearly a week of gray skies and rain. Sunlight cut through the tall office windows of Tom Berger's law firm, landing across piles of files that looked older than justice itself. I sat across from Tom, coffee gone cold in my hand, staring at the spreadsheet open on his laptop. Rows and rows of transaction records. The silence was so deep I could hear his pen tapping softly against the folder, keeping rhythm with his thoughts. His voice finally broke the stillness, gravelly, steady, and absolute. Ed. The $875,000 never reached the real escrow account. I leaned forward slowly. What do you mean? Tom turned the screen toward me. Lines of green arrows linked accounts across banks. He pointed to one. Here. The buyer transferred the funds to an account under Unity Holdings LLC registered in Oregon, opened by Mark Turner 3 weeks before your house sold. I read the name out loud, each word like a bruise. Unity Holdings LLC, a shell company, a fraud built out of arrogance. I let out a dry laugh, not joy, not surprise, just recognition. Mark never understood real value. He thought property could be bought, but honor had no price. Now he'll learn the cost of both. Tom slid another folder across the desk. And this, the notarized sale contract. I picked it up, scanning line by line. The signature read, Edward Hayes, misspelled, one letter off. A mistake no one close to me would ever make. The notary's name is Linda Park, Tom continued. I checked the entire Washington state licensing database. No such person exists. He looked up. The notary is fake. The entire certification fabricated. I set the paper down gently. Funny how one wrong letter can destroy a life. But this time one wrong letter will save mine. The door opened. A woman entered, tall, calm, professional. Her badge read, Detective Lauren Kim, Pierce County Police Department. Mr. Hayes, she said, voice respectful yet firm. I've been reassigned to your case. To be honest, we first thought this was a civil matter. But now... She placed a thick folder on the table. It's an escrow fraud and wire manipulation felony. Tom and I exchanged a long silence, the kind of silence that only those who've waited years for justice can understand. I remembered 3 weeks ago walking into the police station in the rain. A young officer had looked me up and down and said flatly, Sir, this sounds like a family dispute, not a criminal issue. I'd nodded, walked out, and let the rain hide my disappointment. Now the same department was back with a case file thicker than my grief. Detective Kim exhaled. Mr. Hayes, we owe you an apology. This is a felony investigation now. Some apologies don't need tears, I said quietly. Just the word felony is enough. She opened her laptop, revealing a wire trace map. Red lines glowed between States Fire, Unity Holdings LLC, 2 intermediary accounts, Sunfield Bank, Las Vegas, Riverstone Financial, Idaho. 5 sub-transfers, she said. Over $200,000 withdrawn in cash within 48 hours. The rest funneled into Mark Turner Enterprises, also known as Blue Fern Bistro. Tom added dryly, the same cash that covered his overdue tax bill in April. I stared at the screen. All those arrows red and tangled, but to me they were crystal clear. Each one was a lie. And every lie leaves a trail. Detective Kim continued. I've contacted the FBI Financial Crimes Division because this involves interstate wire transactions over $500,000. They're joining the case. If verified, Mr. Turner faces prosecution under Title 18, Section 1443, wire fraud. Tom leaned back, glancing at me. Not just fraud. Forgery and tax evasion, too. The IRS confirmed receipt of your submission from early October. They've officially opened their own investigation. I took a slow breath. Not anger, not triumph. Just balance, a long-delayed restoration. Justice, I said, isn't a shout. It's the sound of footsteps arriving where they should at the right time. Tom nodded. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Want to hear something poetic? Ed Mark's Unity Holdings LLC, the shell company, was registered to a virtual mailbox in Portland. We traced the forwarding address. It's in the same building as a financial firm where Mark once worked. Back in 2010. I closed my eyes, exhaling. He planned this for years. Not for money, for pride. Tom smiled, thin and cold. Well, his pride just turned itself in. Detective Kim packed up her materials. We'll be issuing warrants for Blue Fern's accounts and property. Mr. Hayes, I know this doesn't undo what happened, but you've just helped us build a model case for elder financial exploitation. Your story could help others. I nodded. Thank you, Detective. I don't need sympathy. I just need a certified copy of the truth. After she left, Tom poured fresh coffee for us both. The faint whistle of a ship's horn echoed from the bay outside. He said quietly, When I was young, I thought justice was a courtroom. After 30 years, I've learned justice is the man who stays sane long enough to see it. I smiled. Then I've been waiting 30 years to learn that lesson. We went back to work reviewing evidence piece by piece. The forged contract, the fake escrow emails, routing numbers linking back to Blue Fern, the Facebook listings of Margaret's belongings. Each detail clicked into place, a mosaic of betrayal disguised as love. Tom stacked the files, labeling the binder cover in bold black ink: Hayes v. Turner, Federal Fraud and Elder Exploitation. I stared at those words for a long time. No fear. Only peace, the kind that comes when you've already lost everything and have nothing left to hide. When you have enough evidence, I said, you don't have to raise your voice. The truth will do the talking. By 6 p.m., the light outside had turned a soft steel blue. I stepped out of the office, breathing in the cold air, the smell of rain paper and coffee lingering on my coat. My phone buzzed. A new email, IRS Criminal Division. Dear Mr. Hayes, your submission has been verified. This case meets the criteria for Section 7201, tax fraud and wire misuse. A joint investigation between IRS CID and Pierce County Police will proceed immediately. Sincerely, Agent Robert Levin, IRS Criminal Investigation. I read it 3 times, then smiled quietly, peacefully. Not out of joy, but recognition. The day they called me homeless, they thought I had nothing left. But they forgot I've appraised hundreds of houses in my life and none were ever worth more than the truth. I took out a small photo of Margaret, worn edges, faded ink. On the back in her handwriting, "If we ever lose the house, promise me you'll never lose yourself." I slipped it back into my wallet and stepped down into the fading light. The sky glowed dull blue over the bay. Raindrops clung to my windshield like tiny mirrors. Another buzz. A text from Tom Ed, it's confirmed. The court's summoning Mark and Laura next week. Prepare for deposition. It's time. I stared at the message for a moment, then replied softly to myself, now. It's their turn to tell the truth. I got into the car, engine humming low. In the rearview mirror, my eyes met my reflection, calm, unshaken. My revenge has no knives, no blood, only documents, seals, and signatures. Because justice, when it arrives on time, is the sweetest music a betrayed man will ever hear. Outside, the wind swept in from the docks. A distant ship horn echoed through the evening, followed by the soft chime of an email notification. Case accepted. Investigation active. October 24th, 2025. Tacoma, Washington. The morning was cold and painfully clear. In the offices of Pierce and Berger Associates, sunlight broke through the blinds, striping across a long oak table buried beneath files stamped in red. Case Hayes, Vitas Turner deposition. Hearing federal pretrial. 2 untouched cups of coffee sat between us, steam fading into silence. The air was so dense it could have been cut with a blade. The kind of stillness that happens before a storm breaks, or in this case, before justice does. To my right sat Mark Turner, collar open, expensive watch, gleaming eyes hollow from sleepless nights. To my left sat Laura Hayes, my daughter, head bowed, hands clenched together. And I, Edward Hayes, at the head of the table, said nothing. Because truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't need a voice to announce itself. Behind me stood Tom Berger, my attorney and oldest friend, adjusting his glasses. He pressed the red button on the recorder. Deposition of Mark Turner, October 24th, 2025. Witnesses present Laura Hayes, Edward Hayes. Counsel Thomas Berger, representing Mr. Hayes. The room seemed to contract, smaller, heavier. Tom spoke first, his tone level and deliberate. Mr. Turner, please state your full name and occupation for the record. Mark's voice cracked slightly. Mark Turner, owner of Blue Fern Bistro. Tom nodded. Mr. Turner, did you or did you not sign the escrow authorization document on behalf of Mr. Edward Hayes? Mark's shoulders tightened. He told me verbally he said it was fine. He wanted us to handle it. A pause. Tom tilted his head. Verbal authorization for a property worth $1.35 million, no answer. Mark's eyes flicked toward Laura, then dropped to the table. Tom unfolded a folder, laying out a single sheet, the forged power of attorney. Let's look at this signature. Edward Hayes. 1 letter off. The ink sample doesn't match Mr. Hayes's pens, and the notary ID belongs to a woman named Linda Park, deceased since 2022. Mark swallowed hard. You can't prove I did that myself. Tom didn't speak. He simply nodded to the technician in the corner. A single click. Then through the speakers. Okay, just sign it like this. He'll never know. Mark's voice. Undeniable. recorded that July evening. A faint chuckle followed smug, careless. Laura's head snapped up. Her voice trembled. Mark, you lied to me, Laura. I was trying to save the restaurant. We were going under. No. You said Dad approved. You said there was a real power of attorney. You made me believe I was helping him. You made me betray my own father. Her words broke into sobs. I sat still. Not angry, not triumphant, just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in when truth finally has no opposition left. Tom closed the file. His voice was steady-clipped. For the record, the defendant has now been presented with a self-incriminating audio recording confirming intent to forge as well as the IRS audit and the fraudulent escrow trail under Unity Holdings LLC. This satisfies proof for wire fraud forgery and elder financial exploitation. He turned to me almost softly. The law will handle it from here, Ed. Mark slumped in his chair, color drained. There was nothing left for him to say. I didn't need to see him cry. I just needed to see the law breathe again. 2 days later, Pierce County Court Case Hayes v. Turner. The property located at 1281 Maplewood Drive, appraised at $135 million, is hereby restored to its rightful owner, Mr. Edward Hayes. Defendant Mark Turner is ordered to vacate the premises within 48 hours. The gavel struck once. Clean. Final. I didn't smile. Justice doesn't taste sweet when it's earned through blood and memory. It tastes like silence, heavy and inevitable. October 27, 2025, 8:45 a.m. Tacoma rain was falling again, thin silver, relentless. 3 sheriff's vehicles idled outside the white 2-story house I once called home. Across the street I stood watching. The same blue door. The same porch where Margaret once planted her geraniums. But this time the lies inside had an eviction notice. The sheriff stepped forward, his coat soaked through. Behind him 2 deputies carried the paperwork. Their jackets read, Pierce County Sheriff, Civil Enforcement. The door opened. Mark appeared, pale, disheveled, voice shaking. This is ridiculous. I built this place up. I put money into it. The sheriff unfolded the court order. Mr. Turner, you have no legal right to this property. You are hereby ordered to vacate immediately. Mark's eyes darted everywhere, searching for someone to take his side. Laura stood in the doorway, silent face streaked with rain. You think you've won? He spat, voice cracking. I stepped forward, rain dripping off my coat, and said evenly, No, Mark, I didn't win. Justice did. He clenched his fists, trembling. But the deputies were already leading him toward the car. The door shut a thud that sounded like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Laura lingered. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her lips trembled. Dad, I don't have anything left to say. I met her eyes. You don't need to. Words can't buy back trust. She broke down, falling to her knees on the porch. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't move closer. Some apologies have to echo on their own. 7 months ago, I said quietly, they called me homeless. Today, I stand in front of the same house not to gloat, but to prove that truth still has an address. 2 weeks later, Seattle Chronicle. Headline: Elder fraud case results in full asset reversal. A landmark victory for senior trust protections. Legal aid groups called it a textbook case of delayed but perfect justice. Radio hosts debated it, and for once my name wasn't followed by pity but by respect. I returned to the house. Empty rooms, bare walls. Only the faint scent of lavender, Margaret's scent, still lingered in the air. I walked through each room, slowly running my hand along the walls. These weren't just walls. They were promises kept. At the window, I whispered, "We're home, Margaret." Finally. Outside, the rain had stopped. A thin beam of light cut through the clouds, resting on the photo of us, young, smiling, certain. Karma doesn't always come fast. Sometimes it waits patient, silent, until everyone is watching. And when it finally arrives, it knocks twice. Perfect, that's the emotional closure this saga deserves. Below is the English cinematic translation of your final chapter, fully adapted for your family revenge. Karma. Justice YouTube audience US. Women 55 plus drama and redemption tone. It keeps every emotional beat, sensory detail, and moral reflection of your Vietnamese draft, but written in fluent, evocative, and natural English narration for storytelling voiceover. 3 months after the trial. November 2025. Tacoma had entered the quiet gray of late autumn. The air carried the scent of salt and wet leaves, and the oak trees along Maplewood Drive stood bare, their branches drawn thin against a pale silver sky. The neighborhood was still wrapped in a kind of peace that only comes after storms. I had spent weeks restoring this house. Every wall, every nail, every photo frame hung back exactly where it used to be, as if Margaret had only stepped out for a walk and would return any minute. Her old wooden chair had been repaired, the new oak blending seamlessly into the old crack, sturdy again, but still carrying the warmth of memory. On the table sat a beige envelope. The handwriting on this corner read, "Laura Hayes, Seattle, WA." I had stared at it for 3 days, not because I feared accusations, but because I feared apologies. Sometimes a sincere apology hurts more than betrayal ever did. Finally, I opened it. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, ink pressed unevenly as if written through tears. The first line stopped me cold. "Dad, I called you homeless once, but I was the one without a home." I exhaled slowly, reading line by line. I lost everything, not because of the lawsuit, but because I finally saw what I'd become. I thought I was saving my husband, saving our family. But all I did was trade love for debt and respect for pity. I'm volunteering at legal aid for seniors, now helping people like you people. I once thought I was better than. Every story I hear reminds me of you. Every father I help rebuild his trust fund. I feel like I'm rebuilding the bridge I burned between us. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I finally understand what home really means. At the bottom, her signature, small, shaky, but real, "Your daughter, Laura." I sat still for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. Outside, the wind pushed through the open window, scattering a few old receipts from the table. The scent of damp cedar and steaming black tea mingled in the air. Sunlight filtered in through the window, touching the wedding photo of Margaret and me, taken in 1985 when we'd just built this very house. The wall behind us in that photo still stood here, paint faded now, but firm. Only one of us remained to see it. I whispered softly into the golden light, "Margaret, she finally understands." People think justice is the sound of a gavel in a courtroom. But at my age, I've learned sometimes justice is just a handwritten letter and a heart that finds its way back. I walked to the corner of the living room. Margaret's chair waited by the window facing the small garden. I sat down, the lavender scent of the cushion rising faintly in the air. Outside, leaves drifted down like unsent letters. I folded Laura's note carefully and placed it inside Margaret's cedar box beside her old phone, the restored deed to our house, and her wedding ring. I closed the lid and whispered, "Now we can rest, Maggie." Outside, the sun began to set, a pale amber light spilling across the living room, soft and forgiving. I stepped out to the porch. The air smelled of wet soil and wood smoke. The new wind chime I hung last week tinkled gently in the breeze. At my feet, the old sign read, Hayes Residence, Est Nata, 1985. I had polished it clean and added one more line beneath Rebuilt 2025. I smiled faintly. 10 words, but they carried 40 years of life. They once called me homeless. But they forgot a house isn't made of bricks, it's made of those who find their way back. I turned inside and switched on the radio. The familiar voice of the Seattle local news anchor filled the room in today's special report. The Pierce County elder fraud case continues to inspire state reform. Edward Hayes, whose case restored a $1.35 million estate through legal action, has become the model for a new senior protection bill, informally known as the Hayes Clause. The announcer's voice was calm, warm, almost proud. I leaned against the wall, smiling softly. I didn't need recognition. It was enough to know my pain had built protection for someone else. I brewed a pot of tea, 2 cups as always. One for me, one for Margaret. I still kept that ritual 10 years since she'd gone. Lifting the cup, I looked out the window and spoke quietly. You see, Maggie, the house is still here. Laura's finally learning how to do the right thing. Maybe now you can smile. The tea was warm, slightly bitter, the taste of peace, not revenge. Justice doesn't always thunder. Sometimes it's a quiet afternoon, a letter written in trembling ink, and a father reading it knowing everything has come full circle. I stepped back outside. The street lamps had just flickered on their reflections, shimmering in the wet pavement. A few neighbors passed by with their dogs. They waved. I waved back. They remembered the story, but they no longer looked at me as a victim. They saw a man who had walked through fire and come out standing. I smiled. Words weren't needed anymore. Laura's letter had already spoken for both of us. Back inside, I turned on the light. The room glowed with the soft gold of evening. On the wall hung a new photo taken at a charity fundraiser for legal aid for seniors. Laura stood beside me, smiling shyly, holding a small sign that read, "Every home deserves justice." Her signature lay just beneath it. I touched the frame gently. No anger left, only gratitude. When a person who's wronged you finds their way back, and you have the grace to forgive, that isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of peace. I sat down again in Margaret's chair. The wind rustled the dry leaves outside. The chime whispered softly. And in that moment I knew my life had come full circle. From homeless to home regained. From shame to justice to mercy. And somewhere in that quiet room I could almost hear Margaret's voice, not a warning anymore, but a blessing. Would you forgive your child if they betrayed you for money? Tap. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more family revenge stories where justice speaks softly and always finds its way home. I once called you homeless, but now I know a home isn't made of walls. It's made of forgiveness. This was the story of Edward Hayes, the man they called homeless, who proved that a home can be rebuilt with truth.